What's up, everybody? It's Izzy, and in this video, I'm going to try and condense an incredibly complex topic, which is how to pick your weight class for powerlifting, into less than 10 minutes. If you want a approach to this that's less frenzied and less hurried, I wrote an entire book about this subject. It's called Eating to Win, and you can find a link in the description box. But without further ado, let's get to the subject at hand. So in order to understand how to pick your weight class for powerlifting, you need to understand the theoretical aspects of optimizing performance based on weight and then the practical aspects. So in powerlifting long term, there's not many ways to improve. You can get better technique that enhances your personal leverages more. You can improve your neural efficiency in a given movement pattern, but the most consistent and reliable way that you can improve is to gain more muscle mass, which enhances your mechanical advantage and leverages in every single lift. So in powerlifting, weight classes are really just height classes in disguise. And the reason for that is pretty simple. If you take two lifters who have the exact same body weight and are the exact same body fat percentage, but they are different heights, the shorter lifter is going to have more overall muscle mass. And while that doesn't necessarily guarantee that the shorter lifter will win, it's one of the few advantages that you can actually influence in powerlifting. You can't change your muscle insertion points. You can't change your ligaments and tendons. You can't change your natural level of neural efficiency beyond improving it with training, right? There's certain genetic advantages that people have that cannot really be manipulated. However, the size of your muscles is definitely one of them. And in powerlifting, from a theoretical perspective, one of the ways to absolutely maximize your competitive advantage over the other competitors in your weight class is to try and have more muscle mass than them. And again, for a taller lifter, they're not going to be able to stay in the same weight class with the shorter lifter because more of their body is made up of water, blood, and other organic material that isn't muscle mass. So per unit of height, a short person is going to have more muscle mass in a given weight class than a taller person. So again, from a theoretical perspective, in order to maximize your competitive advantage as a powerlifter, you want to be the shortest, most jacked person in your weight class. You want to have the most muscle mass in that weight class, as that will give you the best possible opportunity to beat your competitors, at least in terms of the variables that you can really control. Now, the next thing that I'm going to show you, it's already been on the screen, but let's talk about it more, is Boris Shako's recommendations for weight class based on height. Now, in the real world, you don't necessarily just completely rely on a chart like this, but where this is useful is that based on 30 years of Boris's experience, you can get a general idea of about where you should be based on your height. Now, I'm not arguing that this is perfectly accurate, and females may need to subtract a weight class because they can't carry as much upper body muscle mass as males. However, again, it's the most accurate one that I've seen, and it gives you a good ballpark range of where you should be. And this is important from the theoretical perspective because now you know whether you're grossly underweight or grossly overweight for your height. So given that you want to be the shortest, most jacked person in your weight class, there's two other factors besides maximizing your muscle mass that you need to think about. And that is controlling your body fat percentage and how much weight you're going to cut using water cutting methods for meets. So let's first talk about body fat percentage. For most males, in my experience, they're going to have optimized performance on the platform for powerlifting with a body fat percentage somewhere between 12 to 18%. Now, there are genetically gifted males who can hang out between 8 to 12% with no ill effects, but if you're not one of those people who's naturally very lean, this probably doesn't apply to you. Females will need to add 6 to 8% to the ranges that I just posted. So if you are over that body fat range, one of the quickest ways that you can improve your competitiveness is to lose some body fat so that you can either move down to the next weight class down, or you can create more room for you to gain more muscle mass while still staying in the same weight class. And again, the second factor that I talked about was water cutting. For 2-hour weigh-ins, I don't personally recommend much more than 3 kilos. You could probably cut 4 if you're really pushing it. And that's, I wouldn't recommend more than 6 to 7 pounds, but some people get away with 8 to 9. That's also a little bit genetic. Some people tolerate cuts better than others. So these factors go into it. So using water cutting and managing your body fat levels, you want to get into the lowest weight class possible at any given time. However, throughout the training year, for reasons that should be obvious, you also want to be trying to gain muscle mass at all times, right? You're trying to get bigger, you're trying to gain more muscle, and then through time, you're no longer going to be able to cut enough body fat and enough water to stay in your weight class. And it's at that point in the real world, in practical terms, that you move up a weight class. So it's when you can no longer make weight in the current weight class and you've really maximized that weight class. You've gained as much muscle as you can while staying in that weight class. And at that point, you move up to the next weight class because you simply need the room in order to gain more muscle to continue to improve. And that's where we come back to a theoretical chart like I've got posted on the screen here, where you can tell if you're close. Because if you're not anywhere near the level of lean muscle mass that you need for your height, you want to bias your training as a novice or intermediate, that's probably what you are, towards hypertrophy. And if you're a more experienced lifter who's been doing this for 10 years or whatever, or you're just an advanced lifter for whatever reason, and you're closer to the optimal weight for your height already, you might want to tone down the hypertrophy bias just a bit so you don't get just because you probably don't have as much genetic room to carry more muscle anyway. Now again, we really have to not get too caught up on this chart, and I'm going to talk about some reasons why. So number one, like I said, people can tolerate having different body fat percentages differently. Some people can be leaner and it doesn't bug their performance, whereas for other people, they need to be chubbier, fatter, to maintain performance and to still recover from hard training. There's genetic individual differences there. The other thing is that at a given height, people can have very different frames. So somebody can be the same height as another person, but have much wider wrists, much wider hips, a broader chest. And that person's going to be able to carry more muscle mass than the person who's the same height as them, but has slim joints and has a slender build. And probably the most important one, of course, is that people just have a natural differences in the amount of muscle that they're able to build. Some people are very genetically gifted in terms of the amount of muscle mass they can build. There's outliers out there. There's also outliers in the other direction where people have below average ability to gain and retain muscle mass. And those people might not be able to get to the recommended height for their weight class without getting too fat. So again, that's why I said you have to know the theoretical and the practical. You can know from a chart like this whether you're grossly underweight or grossly overweight, but the real world has to be your guide. If you're 5'6" and you're 195 pounds and you're already only 10% body fat, you're very genetically gifted for muscle mass, but that doesn't mean that you should lose muscle to get into a lower weight class. You see what I'm saying? And let's say that you don't have great genetics for building muscle and you've been trying to gain weight for 3 or 4 years, but you still don't have enough muscle to be at the right class for your height based on this chart. That doesn't mean that you should just needlessly get fat so that you can move up and say that you're at the right weight for your height. At the end of the day, it comes down to your personal genetics in terms of how much muscle mass that you can carry at a relatively lean body weight, which is also genetic. And also genetic is how much water weight you can tolerate cutting. So it's all three of those factors in the real world that are going to determine your weight class. So while these charts are important to give you a good goal to shoot for, and we can get a general idea if you're underweight or overweight, the real world is the guide in the end. If you can still cut body fat and still cut water to stay in your weight class, you should do that. On the other hand, if you're gaining more and more muscle all the time and you're overweight for your height, but you're lean and you have more room to gain more muscle, then screw the charts, man. Like, keep gaining weight, keep building that muscle so that you can continue to maximize your advantage. So the key point here is that you want to be in the lightest weight class possible while managing your body fat and your water cut. You don't want to have to get too lean and you don't want to have to cut too much water. And at the same time, you should never purposely stop gaining muscle so that you don't have to move up to the next class. You always want to gain more muscle so that you can continue to try and maximize that competitive advantage and to continue to improve over time. So here, that's why I say you need to know the theoretical and the practical. And I hope that gave you guys a more realistic idea of both what you should be shooting for, but then how to also let the real world be your guide so that you don't get lost in some of the theory crap and end up getting too fat, or purposely keep yourself from gaining muscle because you're already supposedly at the right weight class for your height. There's genetic differences, and your main goal should always be as much muscle as possible while still getting into the lightest weight class possible without having to get too lean or cut too much water. Hope that makes sense. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have more ideas for videos, please let me know, because I'm making like 6 a week right now and I run out of ideas. So any ideas always help. And as always, my friends, good luck with your training and have a great day. Peace.